context. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about the educating the heart, so to speak, leading with values in the realm of education. What are the bottlenecks and how can we perhaps transform that?
So a lot of times when you're in the civil service, while the scale is phenomenal, the impact that you can make, but then at the end of the day, sometimes you also have this little vacuum because you're dealing with files, you're dealing with a large number of people, as you mentioned. I mean, in health, for example, you were dealing with 150,000 people working with you as a part of your team. If you looked at the students, medical education, that would be approximately another 150,000. If you looked at the Ayurved, all the different paramedical students, medical MBBS, PG, postgraduate, all of them. And so while you feel you're impacting all of them, sometimes there's a part of you that also wants to have this experience of actually being able to learn or facilitate learning. There's this thing, and I feel in a way what I'm doing now at Auroville is in a way a contrast between what we normally do, which is more like paddy cultivation. You're doing these huge numbers, macro level, to rose cultivation, where you're taking up individual cases. So one always felt this little hunger, appetite for also wanting to complement all this that you do in terms of policy, files, all of it, with this real experience of what is it that happens when does the eyes of the child light up when he or she understands. So this was, my husband and me would go for walks in a, there's a little park in Gandhinagar, which is where we usually stay, and in Gujarat. And so this is, of course, we found that it had just rained and there's a little bit of water in that lake. Normally the lake doesn't have water, it's a park. And so we had these little children from the neighborhood who were there speaking the dialect of Gujarati locally. And so we found we were picking up some of the papers and wrappers, plastic things that were lying there and putting it in the dustbin. So these kids too wanted to know if they could help us. They started doing that, and then this conversation led to they came up to us, and one of them, I still remember his name was Poonam, a little child, and his eyes would have this little bit of an askance. He would have eyes that were slightly thin and something a little impish about those eyes, but a very, very sweet child. So he looked up at me and said, "Tame teacher cho?" So I kind of said, well, not really, but what is it? Shuche. So he said, well, what he asked me, are you a teacher? And then he says, will you take a tuition for us? And suddenly it got me very interested because this is something that I was genuinely feeling hungry for. I wanted to have this experience, kneading the dough with my hands, kind of thing. So when I said yes, the next question was, how much will you take? Ketla lesho. Then we said, no, it's not about money, but you'll have to come regularly. And then that's how this whole thing started. And of course, the numbers slowly grew. And we had at one point of time almost 25 to 30. So it was like one morning, it would be about an hour or so. But what was fun was that some of these were children in the 6th grade and so on, who couldn't, sometimes they couldn't count beyond the number 6. They couldn't add single-digit numbers. But when you sat with them, and I think there is this dimension of education, which is, of course, we talked of the cognitive part, psychomotor skills, but there is also something called the affective or the cognitive, which is more about the heart, the emotional part as well. Sometimes if you just explain, so we would start with laddus. Laddus are these little sweet things, and say if you've had 3 and 2, 3 laddus and 2 laddus, and if you add it up, it becomes 5 and so on. We found that in a matter of maybe a week, less than a week, most of these kids were able to not only perform additions of single digit, even